Hello and welcome to Your Therapist Said What?
This is a place where we are desiring to honor the sacred process of therapy through the intermix of bringing in authentic relationships and conversation through the use of laughter and research.
Welcome to episode 9 of season 1. Let's talk about sex.
Hello and welcome again, everyone. We are your hosts, Nico, Sonia, and Alex. We are therapists in the Twin Cities region of Minnesota, and today we are choosing to talk about sex. So today, because sex is such a broad topic, we have chosen to just come at it with each of our individual perspectives. We all are therapists, but work differently when it comes to sex. And so we have 3 questions that are kind of going to guide us today. And so our first question is, what do you think about when we say the word sex? And so Sonia or Alex, whoever wants to start, let's go there. What do you think about when we say sex?
No one's jumping up to that. Well, okay. I guess I want to say when I hear the word sex, I always think of what my culture and what I was taught about sex growing up, which is pretty minimal. I am Hispanic, and in my culture, well, at least from what I have experienced, there's not a whole lot of talk about sex. It's what you learn on TV, what you learn from people, from friends. And again, I was brought up in a different time, a different era than both of you, right? I have a mother that was born and raised in Mexico. My father was Chicano. I was born and raised in Texas. But even so, I don't recall. It was always like a taboo subject. Nobody ever really talked about sex. So I think of that secrecy. I think of that, those walls that are put up. I think of, I can't ask my parents about sex. It's something where you get quieter, you get softer when you start talking about that. That's what I think when I hear sex. It's secrets, quiet. You can't say anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Alex, what about you? What do you think about when we say sex?
A lot. A lot. I feel like that's usually in my head, though. What do you think? A lot. But also, so I guess the first thing that comes into my mind when I think about sex is the actual physical act of sex. And then kind of pops up a lot like you, Sonia, the little aspects of growing up pop up into my head too. And with it comes a lot of frustration and a lot of anger, just because it was lacking in a lot of areas. Because it was very much, we don't talk about this. This is not okay. Like, this is only something you do when you're married. You can't do it otherwise. Like, just don't. And I was like, that's very limiting, and it makes me not want to talk to you.
So I'm curious, Alex, what is your religion? What were you brought up?
I grew up in a Lutheran church. So, and I feel like there's some Catholicism tossed in there as well, just because my dad's side of the family is Catholic. But then I also went to Catholic University. So I feel like that's kind of tinged into things a little bit, maybe not as strictly as most people. But yeah, that's my background there. Yeah. How about you, Nico?
I think for me, I was also brought up in a faith construct. Grew up, for the most part, evangelical, considered a non-denominational church sector. When I think about sex, it's, wow, how can there not be a lot that comes into your mind around it? I think about the physical aspect. I think about the shame that rises up in me when I hear the word. Just like this visceral response of, I don't know what to do, right? Like, and then I think about like, oh, how many people feel the same shame and the same like, oh, we shouldn't go there, we shouldn't talk about it, and then I think about like how much I love sex and how much I love talking about sex and how much I love incorporating that into my daily work life, and there's an excitement there, a passion. And again, we all know that Nico loves IFS, and part of that is, right? If I had shut off, which I think I did, shut off this sex part of me early on, what else did I shut with it? I think that's this like curious self. So I think about that. And then, yeah, growing up for me, sex was not something we talked about. It was not something we acknowledged outside of I'm married as a cis human to another cis human. And like, that's how we do it. And so, yeah, I think there's a lot of learning that happens for me. And just my mind gets curious. I think that's what happens for me when we say the word sex.
Yeah.
I just want to add to that I don't know why I forgot. It quickly passed out of my head. But one of the other things that I do think about too is just the intimacy within that relationship. And just how wonderful it is. I do really like that aspect of it. And so that does also come up for me.
Yeah.
You know what both of you say about it, when I hear you talk, because of the way I was brought up, I can't connect with that feeling.
The intimacy?
You know, yes. Intimacy for me and sex is something new. It's something new. You know, it was like an act. It was shameful in a way. And I think that has led, not only for myself, but with a lot of people that I work with a lot of families in the Latino community, has led to kind of distort and confuse sex with relationships with intimacy, which have led to unhealthy relationships. I can definitely say that has happened to me in my life. And then I see that it is a pattern that has been repeated in my community, which I want to break. I don't want people to feel that you have to feel this shame, this, you know, it could be more freer, like Nico said. I love it. I like it. I like, you know, thinking about it every day and using it in therapy. And every day since I had my sexology class, I've been working to feel a little bit more comfortable. I didn't know how I was going to get through that class, honestly. I was like, you know, I was in the back, I was in the last row, and when people would talk, like, you know, it was.
I need to hide.
Yes, I did. I was just like, oh my God. If my mother could hear this, she'd be so ashamed. But no.
But I want to, Sonia, thank you for showing up. Thank you for offering that. Because I think that I do connect with that, right? For sex for me, because it was so separated for who I am as a human, was not something that got to be this, oh, it's intimate and it's connected. And it was like, let's just do this thing. Let's do this physical, right? Like, and I think that's started to change, but I think we can't, like for me, in my religious construct, like it was completely separated from who I was until you put a ring on your finger, right? Which was something that the church I grew up in stood by. We're like, hey, once you have a ring on your finger, then you can have sex and it's going to be beautiful.
But if you don't have that ring on your finger, then what does that mean?
Exactly, right? And that's a disconnection. And you can everyone is welcome to have their own belief about it. My bias now is that for me, you can't disconnect that for 25 years and then I get married and then it's just, oh, it's connected, right? Like that's something I've had to stretch through.
You mean it's not like just plugging something into a wall?
Yeah, we can't just plug it in. Plug it in. No.
That's what the Catholic Church expects. Just plug it in.
Yeah,
and I think that's what most of them expect.
The belief system behind it is beautiful, right? The belief system behind the faith construct is a way to keep the community safe from feeling pain, from feeling grief, from feeling all of these deep things. And I think we also have to acknowledge when it no longer fits, right? And that doesn't mean that you should just have sex with every human being and never have pain, like not have any effects on that if you choose to, right? And that's, again, now I'm getting ahead of myself. We get to choose whoever we have sex with and whoever we choose to get into that partnership with. And I think the faith construct around it, my bias, was designed to keep us safe from feeling wounds, from all these things, right?
You say this, Nico, and what comes into my mind is fear. When you said we can have sex with whoever we want, you know, we have that
risk aversion,
risk and fear, and I feel like, you know, and I don't want to feel that way. Unfortunately, you know, I'm not young, everyone, I always say how old I am. I'm not going to say today, but anyway, it sucks that I have to learn to start letting go at such an old age, in a sense, and reframing the way I think about it. Again, this in my personal life, this distorted belief of sex that was created by my culture, by my religion, by my family, has led me to be pretty distorted in relationships and picking relationships. I basically felt you have sex with someone, you have to connect, you have to be with them, you have to stay in that relationship or else you're dirty, which has led me to have bad experiences in my life. And I don't want the girls, I see girls growing up even now in Latino cultures with that mindset. And I don't want anyone to have to go through that and have to go, into their adult life, still hearing that word.
And so then I guess the question becomes, at least for me, my own integrative question that I'm working through currently is, how do we hold if we want to hold aspects of it sacred, how do we do that and not live in this fear, like only do it this time, only do it here? Like, it's so structured. So how do we do the both and, right? How do we see it as this really, really cool thing, this really exciting thing, this really sacred thing, and this thing of like, what am I trying to say?
Is it safe to say you need to get to know yourself, have that intimacy with you?
Yes.
What I feel and what I want out of a relationship and out of a sexual relationship can vary from someone else. And even if I choose to take some of those aspects that I was taught growing up, that it's something sacred, it's something you keep with, someone that's special, just knowing who you are, who you are, and then knowing what do I want. So having that intimacy with self. I mean, that's all I can think of.
Yeah, well, and I think for me, the thing that comes up, and again, I put the next question on the bottom because I think for me, that's what it plays into is, right? Because it talks about, like for me, anything sexual, right? Don't touch a penis, right? Don't masturbate. Don't do any of these things, right? And again, there was reasons that those constructs were built, and my bias, my therapeutic and my personal bias is that you have to, like you said, Sonia, get connected with yourself. And right, part of that is exploring your own body, right? It's exploring what feels good. That's the sexual, the physical act of sex piece. And then there's getting to know yourself intimately. Can we slow down long enough to feel all of these sensations in our body? Right. I was on a podcast last week called Fun Parts. And one of the things that this podcast talks about is the difference between sexuality and sensuality. And the idea of sensuality, right, is like, in my mind, when we say that, first of all, it's like, no, don't go there. Don't say that word. Right. And yet it's such a cool word. And like, when I think about it, I was like, I have no freaking idea what that means. But all it is I'm feeling with all of my senses. Right. Sensuality is feeling with all of my senses, which I would say is a vital part of sexuality or sex, the act of sex, right? Is being able to feel the body, feel what's happening, feel the good things, the bad things, feel all these things. And that was a message for me that we just couldn't talk about. And again, it's not because my parents didn't want to go there. It's not because A, B, and C. It's because they didn't have that themselves, right? And they can't give me something they don't have.
What part of that, though, too, is just how disconnected most people are from their emotions and from their body itself. I feel like they're very interconnected.
Yeah.
And that we don't pay attention a lot to our bodies in general. And then especially when it comes to sex, because we've been so disconnected from sex.
Yes. I'm glad you said that, because I think we're talking about sex, but I think the conversation starts way earlier than we're even talking about actually sex, right?
It's always what is contributed to in your mind, logically, cognitively.
Yes.
As you guys continue to talk, things keep coming to mind. And I think that another thing that formed my beliefs around sex and my fear, and I'm willing to say that I think it's still present, is as a young child, I blossomed early. So I was always being sexualized And that really bothered me because inside I still felt like a child. I still felt like a young girl. And I would have comments made when I wasn't ready. And I didn't know who to go to about that. And it made me feel bad. So I think it's not just my culture, it's also my upbringing. And I hate to see like you guys saw me. I'm always getting ready. I'm always doing my hair. I'm always putting on makeup. I identify with the central part of who I am, and I feel comfortable with that. I think that is just who I am. But I don't like it when it gets distorted and it becomes a sexual identity, and people start sexualizing me and not knowing who I am. Like that started, I would say, I mean, Alex, you can chime in on this, that this is an experience that probably a lot of young girls go through as they're going through puberty.
I remember the first time, like it was outside of my child awareness, but it was brought to my attention just as a safety concern, was when we were in Rochester for dance competitions, because certain cultures, based on our dance costume, we look like prostitutes apparently in certain cultures, because we're running around in leotards and tights, not much. And so that was kind of like my first awareness. And I'm just like, as a kid, I distinctly remember being like, well, that's stupid. I'm all hot and sweaty. And I wear this every day.
Boom. My mom didn't let me play football with my brother and his friends. I'm like,
so think about those messages you guys received.
Well, and that's the second one though, that I distinctly even better remember, because it was within my awareness. I was in high school. Back when I was in high school, we liked wearing sweatpants and baggy sweatshirts because that was comfy and awesome. As a result, you really couldn't tell anyone's figure, guy or girl, because we're all just wearing baggy clothes. And I remember it was the weekend, I think it was like either day after prom or like weekend after prom or sometime around prom, that I had shown up at church and I was wearing something not baggy. I was like actually wearing form-fitted, nice clothing, not a sweatshirt and sweatpants. And I remember adult youth leaders commenting and be like, oh, we didn't know you were so little. Oh, you're so skinny. And like all this stuff. And I'm just like, I'm really uncomfortable and I want my swimming sweatshirt back on now. And I just kind of looked at them like, why are you as an adult in your 40s and 50s commenting on this? And I just walked away. Uncomfortable.
So we go from our experiences, we get this shitty end of the stick about this. We go like, oh, I like this lifestyle. And we're like,
well, and think about that though. Think about the messages everyone receives as a baby, right? Just about like, how often do we say, oh, let's sing the song, head, shoulders, knees and penis, like, right? Like we don't say that. So what does that teach us though? It teaches us to set this part of ourselves aside, right? So this physical aspect. And again, this has implications.
Nico, I have to ask, are you rewriting that song?
We will be singing that to my child.
Okay.
Awesome.
Head, shoulders, knees and penis. Head, shoulders, knees and
penis. Are you ready?
Is female.
What's that?
How about if your child is female?
Oh yeah, we're still doing it.
With the penis?
Oh, well, no, we'll switch it to the vagina, but
Okay. Let's get back. Sorry.
Right? But like that idea of, and again, even as you guys talk, I'm like, oh, you poor girl. Like, how do we and again, this is, let me get this word out there, or this thought out there, because I don't really know what I'm trying to say, but like, how do we create sexuality as a part of the human experience rather than the special thing that we need to achieve? Right? So like my sexuality, that might include my sexual organ. It might include my passion. It might include all of these different aspects, not just sex. And so how do we allow that to be a part of our baby's lives? Right? How do we allow our baby to feel sensations? How do we teach our baby that they can have boundaries? Right? All of these pieces that play into sexual intercourse later on, or sexual activity later on. but how do we incorporate it rather than creating this divide because, oh, this scares us because biblical scripture talks about sexual immorality. Well, do we really know what that means? Like, how do we challenge that so that we can have a sexual identity from birth? I don't know. And I think it's a hard question. And again, I'm not blaming anyone because even as I'll be a dad in a couple weeks, right? But the idea of, okay, how do we do that? And I don't know.
Well, we're going to have this conversation later if you have a
girl. Y'all, we gonna have to have so many conversations.
Youth change.
It's going to be fun.
Yeah.
So many conversations.
Okay, so we led into the second question, thoughts on sex, messaging, media, sex talk, etc., and how this has impacted your view. So we pretty much talked about how our culture, maybe the messages that we have from society impact our view. I want to redirect it a little bit. And what have you guys seen, especially, I mean, I work with a lot of adolescent kids, preteen kids, and some couples, but what have you seen in the therapy room? What is the thing now? I learned so much from the kids that I work with. I didn't know what a hit and pass was. Do you know what hit and pass is? I know this one was telling me that his girlfriend was mad at him because she heard that he said she was a hit and pass. I was like, what is that?
What is that?
Have sex and pass it on. Yep, hit it and pass it on. I'm like,
hit and pass. Gotcha. Yes.
Yeah. And maybe, you know what? Maybe I'm saying it wrong. I don't know if it's a different.
Okay.
I don't know.
And then another thing that I've learned from the kids that I work with, and it's funny that they're all in the same age group from like 15 to 16, is the V card. Oh, so-and-so has a V card. Like, okay.
Gotta steal that V card.
And when I do talk to kids about sex, I have to say that in the beginning, I guess because a lot of my kids will see me as a
was that in the beginning?
In the beginning, yeah. I will have a conversation and they're like, oh, it's okay to talk about this here, and I'm still a work in progress. It still feels more and more comfortable as I go on. It's still not completely comfortable for me, but that's, the little bit of work that I keep doing, and I try and do it with these kids. I try to do it for myself as well. But what are the things that you see in the therapy sessions now? That's my perspective with my group of kids. Anything else?
I currently have a really, really, really wide range. I think my youngest kiddo I'm seeing right now is 6, and my oldest adult is 65. So I have the really big range right now, and I see it show up in Sonia is gone. I see it show up in every aspect of our work. I think Sonia's back. Here she is. Hey-o.
Hey.
Oh, there we are. Okay.
So I see it show up with all of them. What I am seeing right now, everyone needs to talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And they will not breach the topic first. So in my intakes, I often ask about sexuality. So whether it's porn, whether it's masturbation, whether it's sexually active, whatever that might be for that client, I usually bridge it so that we can go there. And one thing I'm seeing a lot of right now is just the shame. And again, that's just something I see a lot of in my work. And so I think the shame is the part that I identify closest with. And so deconstructing that. What does your faith tradition talk about it? How does your family talk about it? How do we identify that even if we can't breach the idea of is sex before marriage or after, whatever, if I do this in marriage or whatever it might be, however you identify that, can we at least identify that you get to explore your body and how that feels?
Do you ask that question to all, during intake for all of your clients, or is it only if it is like a couple or, okay. And so I see intakes that include sexual orientation, but you're going beyond that. Am I correct when I say that?
When it comes, like, I want to know sexual orientation and sexual identity and gender and all that stuff because I want to work with that person with what they feel is important. Mm-hmm. And I care more about what they're doing because I think that shows me how they're feeling. Okay. Right? Because for me, I don't care who you're having sex with. Go have sex with everyone. What do I like? Great. Awesome. Love that. You have tons of experiences. What I care about is what is the self-messaging you have about that?
Okay.
Are you masturbating and watching porn and then telling yourself you're a piece of shit? Okay. Let's work on that. Right. Because in my thing, like, go for it. Right. Something I tell my clients all the time is, hey, for the next week, give yourself permission to do what you need to do and let me know the self-messaging. Right. And what I find out is that I have right now, like this last couple of weeks, a ton of people coming in with what they would call sexual dysfunction. Right. So whether it's a porn addiction, whether it's my wife and I haven't had sex for a month, whether it's fill in the blank. And what I'm finding out is for most of those people, it's wrapped in a shame message, whether that be from childhood, whether that be from society. So that's what I'm seeing a lot of right now is sexual shame, and people are calling dysfunction because of that shame.
And, you know, I was going to bring that up, that with some couples, what I see is if, like you said, if they're not having a lot of sex and the husband decides to watch porn, women they fly off the deep end. They're like, oh my God, you know. So I've always struggled with that question. And not personally, I mean, I guess I'm not really concerned, or it doesn't really bother me much, but would you consider watching porn as infidelity? I did have a couple that they were struggling with this, that the wife considered her husband watching porn as infidelity. She felt, you're watching that stuff. You're watching that dirty stuff. That means you no longer want me. So what do you guys think about that? What would be your view?
I guess that really depends on the individual relationship. And this is, again, why I don't deal with couples. This is very complex. And I don't want to touch it.
I agree.
But I guess it's...
Send them to me. I think it's fun.
It's diving... I think it's diving into, why do you find this as a form of cheating and infidelity? Where does your view stand? Where does husband's view stand? And like trying to bridge the gap and see how they can come to an understanding for each other and open that communication is really what it sounds like is needed to me. And start that dialogue, because some couples, it sounds like, are really not talking about sex. It's kind of
because it's taboo.
Well, yes, I know we don't talk about it. How dare
places.
we? How dare we talk about it?
Y'all screwed if you're in my house.
You talk about it all the time,
Oh, we talk about sex all the time.
Yeah. Having
sex, sexuality, like how do we integrate this with our kid? Like that's something we've tried really hard, at least in the last.
And see what I can. I want to be a fly in your wall.
Come on over, girl. We will welcome you into our conversations. But and I think that's because both of my spouse and I, that is something that held a lot of shame for us, right? So sexually active before marriage, masturbation, pornography, fill in the blank, all of that held shame. And so our goal in the last probably year and a half has been, how do we destigmatize that for ourselves so that we can connect on a deeper level, right? Because we want it to be more than just a physical act, right? And I think in order to connect on a deeper level like that, you have to start, kind of like Alex was saying, you have to take some of these pieces off and learn to just talk and communicate and open that up. And I think tying this back into your question, Sonia, with a lot of couples, I will say, like, okay, I don't have a problem if you're doing that, unless you feel like it's an issue. If you think it's an issue, let's talk about it, right? Let's talk about if the wife is watching porn, right? And I purposely say that because I want to destigmatize that men and women can watch porn. And what if one partner is watching porn? Why? Right? What are they getting out of it? Does it bring them a sense of connection? Does it bring them excitement? What does it bring them? And if we don't want them to do that, can we work together, kind of, Alex, what you're saying with the communication, and say, is that something we can incorporate into the marriage? Can we incorporate exploration? Can we, and again, you would find the couples typically dropping dead when I say that, but like, can we bring in exploration? Can we bring in language? Can we bring in all these pieces?
What about watching porn together?
Yeah.
You know, is it that, you know, just that it's being watched without the spouse? Because if that's the case, okay, well then just be like, hey, I'm gonna go watch porn. You want to come watch porn with me? And you guys watch porn together. What I'm
finding right now, just in the last, probably since COVID, a a lot of pornography use and people aren't wanting it, right? So it's like, I just can't stop. And so I'll talk about like, they want to stop and they can't, right? So we're talking about, okay, what happens for you before, during, and after you watch, right? Like, what is that experience like? And what I'm finding is there are a lot of lonely people.
Mhm.
And one of the ways they feel, and again, I was reading some information the other day from a psychologist in California talking about sex and sexual intimacy and the connection with childhood. And what she was talking about, which I think I align with, is people who felt emotionally cut off as kids tend to find intimacy through sex easier. Or like, not intimacy, connection. Like they find, what am I trying to say? They feel connected during sex. And so that's something they have struggled with because they can't stop or they're addicted to it, or fill in the blank, whatever they define it as.
It fills an intimacy need that was missing.
Yes.
Is what you're trying to say?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And so how do we pull that apart and say, okay, you never had that, so let's get that for you. And if you don't want to find it through pornography or masturbation or sex, great. We'll jump on board with that. But can we at least say that you have a need that wasn't met and we want to meet that? And we don't get to shame kids, or we don't get to shame people because their young self didn't get a need met.
Okay.
Right. And so starting to pull that apart.
More about that. When you do not get a need met as a child, how does that affect your view and your behaviors or your thought processing about sex as an adult? I know that you can probably go into 1,000,001 things about this.
Mm-hmm.
But Nico, give me one of the more common situations or scenarios.
My head's blowing up because there's 1,000,001 ways you could go with it. Again, my view is very much informed by my work with internal family systems, right? And the whole idea of that is I have this young part who learned that if I touch my penis, okay, let's just take it for me. Let's make this personal. For me, I have this young part, right, that sex wasn't talked about, right? And I felt these things, but I wasn't supposed to act on them, or others I was sinning, right? And this part of myself then started to just go into the corner and lock itself away, right? And what my system didn't know growing up is that when we lock away that part, we also lock away this part that has the ability to intimately connect with people in a non-sexual way too, right? And so for me, the journey has been venturing back and rescuing that child self who thought, hey, all of this, which also incorporates my creativity, which also incorporates my intimate connection, was locked away. So how do I go back and be with that young self and say, hey, I love you. You get to go there. And if you need to explore with masturbation, if you need to explore with fill in the blank, we can do that, and that's okay.
How old were you when this came about?
When it was locked away.
Mm-hmm.
Well, typically I say 0 to 5, and I would say it has been there, right? And again, part of the thing is expanding this conversation and saying it's not just, did you talk about sex as a child? It's, how were your sexual organs talked about? How was connection talked about? How was intimate relationship talked about? We make everything super sexual, right? So like if I talk about intimately connecting with you guys, we all of a sudden a lot of us all of a sudden go to sex. And it's not. I'm intellectually connected with you guys. And that's why I love the podcast, because we get to do that. Mm-hmm. Right? And yet that was talked about as, oh, that's only for your spouse, so we shouldn't go there, which is so fucked up, right? And so it's opening up this whole box and saying, how can we connect in deeper levels to everyone, where that can lead to sexual connection later on. Does that make sense?
Yes.
My brain's kind of feeling like it was mindfucked, and so I'm not.
So the difference between a sexual connection and intimacy is basically what you're talking about. Like, you can have an intimate relationship with someone, not necessarily physical. You can have a human connection with someone, and it doesn't have to be physical. And it really doesn't even have to be intimate, but not being afraid of human connections, and maybe even having to label it, especially when there are friendships between men and women. Why does it always have to be sexual? Why does it always have to be a connection between a man and a woman and eventually wanting sex? Now, I have an issue with that. I have a lot of male friends, and I keep the male friends around that are able to be my friend and not always have to connect it into a sexual content. Where I see females that cannot have male friends without it being sexual. Guys, some of my best friends are men because they don't gossip. They give me a different perspective. They're gentle to my needs, and it doesn't have to be physical. I love it. I absolutely love it. I guess you guys know I'm also in the music business, so I deal with a lot of men. And if I get someone that gets near me and then they want to turn the friendship into a sexual context without me wanting to, I shut them out. But I challenge people who think that women cannot have male friends without it being sexual.
Well, let's challenge that the other way around. And for guys and having friends that are girls and it not being a dating sexual relationship.
Yeah.
And I bring that up because my brother is a prime example in that we had thrown a surprise birthday party for him in high school, and my job was to invite all his friends. And legit, it was a bunch of girls in our basement and like maybe 3 guys. And that was awesome. I mean, everyone was fabulous and all that, but people would ask him stuff. And I mean, even now, his best friend is a girl. And it's I love them dearly. It's so funny to hear their adventures together because they're out hunting one day and then she's dragging him out shopping the next.
Nice. I love that.
Yeah, it's fabulous.
And it doesn't have to be gay. I mean, I have friends that I love that I take shopping, but it doesn't necessarily have to be gay. And I think that those are relationships that I enjoy the most. That I get to be myself. I get to be real. I don't have to be fake. I can be who I am. Why does it seem that when we have girlfriends, sometimes we are trying to one each other up or we're trying to perform for each other? And when I have a male friend, that doesn't happen.
It's real.
It's like, it's a good connection, but then there's boundaries. I absolutely love it. So that brings me to something else, Nicole. When you're talking about connecting with other people and finding the pieces that you need in your life to feel connection, to feel intimacy without going there. I love to dance. And I just recently started up on my salsa, lessons. And I love the community that I find there because you can dance with anyone. It's such an sensual way of communicating without you having to go home and sleep with someone. And you feel that connection. I mean, there's touch, there's this, there's leading, and you get that feeling of I'm not alone, but then you can go home and not have to deal with, boyfriend, girlfriend bullshit or partner bullshit if you're in that stage of your life of being single, right? Mm-hmm. And that was so fulfilling for me. It is. I absolutely love it. Anything else that you guys can think of that can be connected?
Well, I think that's though a lot of what I'm seeing with like 4th, 5th graders in the therapy room is they're trying to figure out relationships.
Yes.
And it's one kid in particular jumps into my mind and they're trying to figure out romantic relationships and just being like, okay, so with the puppets, one day the one puppet is acting like your stereotypical Karen. and my puppet's just like, whoa, dude, you're too much. Because I'm sitting here trying to model that healthy relationship. And she's trying to figure it out. And it gets really interesting some days. And she's like, well, no, you're supposed to act this way. And I was like, but my puppet doesn't like this. Oh shoot, I'm forgetting his name. Gerald. Call my puppet Gerald. My two guy puppets that are the favorites are Gerald and Harold. They're best friends.
So where do people start?
What do you mean?
When we talk about sex, right? If I were to listen to this podcast 7 years ago when I was an undergrad or just graduating, no, not 7 years ago, 6 years ago. If I were to be listening to this 6 years ago, I would be like, Yeah, I'm not going there. Sex is bad. Da, 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 da.
Wow.
Right. So where do people start when they want to deconstruct sexuality, sexual intimacy, connection? When they want to debunk that, pull it apart, where do they start?
I usually start at the black and white thinking. Why is it bad? What makes it bad in one case, but then in another good, when there's really the only difference is the marriage.
Mhm.
Because everything's going to feel the same. Everything's going to be the same.
Yep.
So, what do you mean
weird.
differences?
And I start gently challenging that.
Okay.
I think for me, it's I love that how you structured that, and I think adding on top of that, finding where that fear is, right? So, what's the difference? What's the like the black and white? What's the difference between you're married and you're not married, but everything else is the same, right? Okay? Well, the Bible says okay. So where's the fear, right? Like, what is your fear? Is the fear that you're going to go to hell if you do it? Is your fear that you're gonna be shamed for your family if you do it? Is like finding. So I would say what Alex said on top of it for me is where's the fear?
Okay. My fear is losing that personal special connection. Getting into and again, that's just
Say it again.
losing that connection of feeling that you are that person's special one, and there you if it becomes just sexual,
Mhm.
then I'm no longer important to that person as a person. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Losing
Mhm.
that connection.
Mhm. So I think um I think we have to start to pull apart what that is. Like for me, my personal, not professional, my personal bias is that sex gets to be in an intimate relationship, right? So if I have a intimate long-term relationship, then sex gets to be a part of that. Whether we slap marriage on there or not,
Okay. Okay.
it gets to be a part of that,
Okay.
right?
And I agree. In any relationship, I think sex is very important. It's very, very, very important. But then again, that's my personal opinion because I do know that there are relationships where there is no sex. And what happens if your partner can no longer perform? It could be an illness, it could be age, it could be, anything. How then do couples continue to have a relationship? I don't think that a relationship needs to end because there are issues with sex. Now, like I said, I think it's a very important part of it. But if you've had a very healthy sexual relationship and then boom, something happens and one of the partners cannot perform, women go through menopause and then it might get erectile dysfunction. People who have diabetes sometimes have issues with their sexual responses.
Yep.
How then do you continue with that relationship when you've lost this important aspect of it? If people identify their relationship too much with just sex, I guess there has to be a balance, then that might be lost. But if you have a balance of intimacy and sex, I think that there is a way that you can continue to work, maybe more on the intimacy side, become more creative. So yeah, any thoughts on that?
I think it gets to be individual, right? Like what works for me and my partner doesn't have to work for you and yours, right? And the whole idea of, and again, this is, thank you for bringing that up because I think that's what I see a lot of like, well, we're supposed to be having it every day. We're supposed to be having it every week. We're supposed to be having it every month.
Okay.
Who says?
Okay. Yeah.
Right? And so let's pull it apart and say, what do you need to feel connected, to feel integrated?
Mm-hmm.
What does your relationship need, right? Because I think what my wife and I needed when we got married is very different than what we're looking for now.
Okay.
Well, and I
Right?
think too, you got to take into account not just the couple as a couple your needs, but each individual.
Mm-hmm.
Someone might have a higher drive than another
Preach.
person. And so it's figuring out how to work together, and the person with the higher drive, learning that it's not you.
Yes.
And it's not anything
Neither's the
personal
problem.
against you. Neither's the problem. It's just trying to work together to figure out a good balance for both of you. And it's possible.
So would it be safe to say that we all agree that the place to start is just by talking?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Definitely. Just having that very clear, candid conversation, honest conversation, agreeing that there's going to be no shame on either side.
And taking the good and the bad out of it. Okay. I think that's a big part with the shame.
Get it?
Is taking out the good and the bad.
Yes. So I have to say that even though I've had, in my process of change, I've had this conversation and try to be more open in my relationships regarding sex. But then sometimes I get opposition from the other person because they're not comfortable with it. And they're not. So what then? Move on? No.
Follow it.
Okay.
Right? Don't give up. And I think the idea of, right, like, if one partner thinks that the only way to have sexual connection is we have sex, and one says, oh, I want to have sex, but I also want to masturbate, like, let's talk about that. Right? And let's dive into it. Okay, why do I think this? Why do I think this? Why do I have a problem with that? Does it scare me? Does it make me fearful that our relationship's going to end? Well, we know that that's not true, right? There's couples all over the place that do both. Does that make sense? So, like, let's talk about it. And I think going back to that perspective of start with yourself. What do you need as a human being? What feels good to you? Then let's go out a layer. What feels good to you and your partner? Okay, then let's go out. What feels good to you and your family? Then what feels good to or friends? And then vice versa. What feels good to your friends or your family? And just keep going out, right? Which allows us to have communities who have their own identity, right? Each individual has their sexual identity or intimate identity, each person, and it goes out. Does that make sense?
It does. I think, though, you get into an issue when the bubble gets big enough to be society.
Oh.
But I don't think everyone in those things needs to agree. Fair. Right? We're not saying like the whole society, the whole community, the whole church, the whole family needs to agree. It's what feels good to each one. And if we have a couple where both couples know what feels good to them, it's going to be a healthy relationship, I think, in that realm. Does that make sense?
That's fair.
I wanted to talk. I think I know we're going to do a second part to this, and we're talking about that. Working. You didn't hear about that?
I forgot.
Okay. I mean, you talk about stuff, you can go on here forever and ever. So we're talking about the feeling good, the feeling bad, the shame, working through couples. I want to also, and we might not get to this during this hour, but I want to also talk about some of the not so happy things about sex. Abnormal sexuality, sexual abuse. How is that being handled, and how can talking about sex help children, protect children? What are the views on that? What happens if you are a victim of sexual abuse? How is that? What does that look like? I mean,
we might have to have a whole season on this.
Yes, this is one of the hardest things that I had to work with, even as a therapist. I did not know how to handle it. I remember the first time that I got, a client that came in that was sexually abused. I didn't know where to start. I'm starting to feel more and more comfortable because I had to look at my own views and my own biases as well, my own feelings. Talking about pedophiles in recovery and having them go through therapy. Is this something that's doable? Is this something I know that nobody, even therapists, that's the last population people want to work with, the least. And so how you get, even as a therapist, how do you get, good feelings out of that? How do you get something positive out of that? So just the things that I want to throw out that we can probably talk about. It might not be as, happy and chipper as Nico loves sex. I love that though. But so there are other aspects. There is a darker side, unfortunately. And how do we deal with that and bring it back into the light?
I also want to add on here, and again, I think we forgot to do the trigger warning. So there's a trigger warning with this. I do want to say that one of the populations that I really do like working with is I hate this language, but the perpetrator, right? Because I believe that there's a wounded self in there, right? And so I think the reason I say that or add that in there is because I want everyone to have a space to talk about it openly, right? Without the judgment. And I think as therapists, we get to create this space where people get to authentically open up into that.
Okay. Perfect.
And authentically engage.
So
So with that being said, we are at about 50 minutes here. So let's do takeout. So think about everything that we talked about and think about your one piece that you want people to take away from this conversation.
It's okay to explore
Okay.
yourself, your sexuality, everything. And just to try to figure out what you're comfortable with, where you're comfortable with things outside of everyone else's systems, really deep down into what do you believe and what are you comfortable and okay with.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go take a little bit from what Alex said. Feel comfortable, explore. But I want to add a little bit to it. Explore, what did your culture teach you? What parts of that? I mean, I have to say that I do like some of the aspects that my culture taught me about marriage, about sexuality, but I don't have to take it all. So explore who you are. Have an intimate relationship with yourself first. See what you can and cannot handle, and then go from there. Don't let anyone push you into something that you really feel uncomfortable with, or you're just not ready for it.
Yes. Mm-hmm. I would say for me, backing up you guys as well, I think for me is to know that you are worthy to be loved. And that means you're worthy of loving yourself as well. And loving yourself gets to be, like Alex said, exploring without shame, without abandonment. So that would be my takeaway. With that, thank you again for listening. We hope you enjoyed a little bit of our candid conversation on sex, and we hope you will join us next time when we talk about the less satisfying and darker parts of sexuality and sex. With that, have a great day, and thank you for listening to Your Therapist Said What?